we're delighted that you're able to join us for some professional learning this afternoon. The session this afternoon is looking at building STEM capital with families and communities, and it's been specifically put together for the east of Scotland, so that's looking at the Tayside Regional Improvement Collaborative, Forth Valley and West Lothian, also the South East Improvement Collaborative, and it's been planned together with colleagues, as I say, from CLD and STEM and family learning. So I'm Mary Thompson, lovely to meet you this afternoon, and I'll be taking you through the first part of the session before handing over to a colleague, Hazel Gardner, and then on to Lynn Yenica. And please feel free to pop any kind of comments or questions or wonderings into the chat, and we'll do our very best to respond to those. So thanks, Julie. If you don't mind moving on to the next slide, we can just take you through a little bit more around STEM capital and exploring that with you this afternoon. So as I mentioned, this has been planned and put together by STEM education officers, Hazel, myself, Mary and Lynn, and you can see that we're covering a good section of the east of the country, and we're also joined by colleagues from the Improving Gender Balance and Equalities team, and we've got Mary, Gemma Rose and Fiona Shaw. So if you don't know who these colleagues are, we'll be delighted to share their email addresses with you and for you to be in touch with us about the work that we're doing within your region. So thank you very much. Julie, if you're able to move on, thank you. So this afternoon's the programme, we've got 3 sessions planned for us. This is the first session, which is really an introduction to the concept of STEM capital, and then moving on to very specifically CLD practice, and the session 3, family learning and parental engagement practice examples. And it's great that so many of you have signed up to come along to the sessions this afternoon. And we're really keen to sort of hear your thoughts, hear your wonderings about your needs, so that we can feed them forward into the programme and really adapt the programme in terms of what you're looking for too. So if you have another device, a smartphone perhaps, could you click on that QR code and it'll take you to a Menti, and we're going to just see some of your wonderings, your thoughts, your needs and expectations for the programme as we move forward. And we'll be able to, as I say, inform the outline of the programme moving forward based on what you say to us. So if you can do that, if you can go to either click on the link there or go to menti.com and type in the code. There's Hazel. Thank you very much, Hazel, popping that into the chat pane for us. And as you type in a wee bit about your thoughts, your questions, your needs and your expectations, we'll be able to tailor the programme to you. And as you do that, I should see them appearing on the screen, and then we'll be able to switch. Oh, somebody's saying it's not allowing them to sign in. I wonder if others are having that same issue. Can colleagues on the chat confirm that that's working for them okay? Hazel, are you able to confirm that?
Sorry, Mary, just checked. It worked okay for me there.
It's working fine. So I'm sorry, Melissa, if you want to able to just even to type into the chat. So as the kind of series of three sessions, what are your sort of thoughts, needs and expectations for the programme? Thanks for confirming that, Jane and Ailsa, that it's working for you too. So as you type into that Menti, I should start to see some come through on my slide here, and we can share that with you. Thanks, Menstrie, for confirming that too. Kaylee, you're not seeing anything? That's interesting. Oh, I'm starting. So I've got 5 people have responded so far, so that's great. So maybe, Julie, if I can start presenting.
Yeah, sure. I'll just stop presenting.
That'd be great. Start to see some of the words coming through here on the screen. Folks, hopefully you can see that. Hazel, can you confirm if you're able to see this screen? It's
just loading up for me just now, Mary. I can see it now.
So far we've had 10 people. Thank you, colleagues, for taking the time to fill that in. Some people are looking for sort of shared practice and resources in terms of family learning. Again, good practice. Ideas about how to deliver STEM. Some information about STEM capital, understanding. Yeah, people are looking just for information about how to take that forward with their families. STEM and improvement plan and up-to-date thinking, strategies for increasing family engagement, and wider school communities. And we're aware that people are coming from kind of different backgrounds, whether that's a school background in early learning and childcare, or a partner setting, or community learning development. We've got a whole range of colleagues on the call this afternoon. So
Mary, can I just jump in? I don't know, I know I got knocked out there, but Amy Dixon was just asking if session 2 and 3 would be suitable for practitioners, teachers as well. She's obviously here in the first call, and she's just wondering if the next 2 sessions will be relevant to teachers as well.
Yeah, very much so. I think when we design the sessions, we're looking at obviously anybody that's working with children and families, and obviously that can be a school setting and also in a kind of community setting. The focus certainly will be in session 2. Will be delivered by our CLD colleagues, and some of the resources will be applicable to both. So yes, absolutely, very, very relevant for you too. So we've got 22 people there. So we'll maybe revisit this at the end, and we'll share this with you as we move forward. So thank you very much for taking your time to fill that in and to share your thoughts. I'm going to stop presenting and come back to you, Julie, if you're able to do that. So hopefully that's been helpful, just to see even shared thoughts as to what we're looking for. So I'm going to stop presenting and come back to you, Julie.
Thank you. Just shout if this doesn't come on at the right page.
Nope, that's super. Thank you so much. So the slide that you're seeing just now tells you a little bit about the STEM education and training strategy for Scotland, and that is indeed a 5-year strategy. Obviously, we've had COVID within the middle of that. It is, as I say, a 5-year strategy, and it's got 4 themes at the heart of that. There's a wee link there if you'd be interested in finding out a little bit more about the strategy, the aims and the ambitions of the strategy. That's also there too. So there's 4 themes. There'll be no surprise to those of us working within local authorities at the moment, and they are excellence, equity, connection and inspiration. And the thing about this strategy is that it's for all sectors. It's for if you're in early learning and childcare, it's for primary, for secondary, for community learning and development, for the whole kind of spectrum for colleges as well. And it's really about how ambitious Scotland is towards becoming a STEM nation, and STEM for every single person, whether you're young or old. And it's really, really important. And that's why the government has put a lot of support and money behind it too. If you're able to move on to the next slide, Julie, the next slide says a little bit more about some of the actions within the STEM strategy underneath each of those 4 themes: excellence, equity, inspiration and connection. And some of the type we've put in bold for you specifically, so whether you're, depending on which setting you're from, you can see. So in bold are actions for sort of schools and local authorities if you're in that kind of context. The coloured text is specifically for CLD, and we will share the slides with you. I appreciate it might be quite small for you at the moment. And if it's bold and colour, that's for both kind of schools, local authorities and CLD. So hopefully you can see some of the actions that are specifically relevant for yourselves. And if you're able to move on, that would be great, Julie. And we wanted just to share a little bit of the kind of context for this webinar this afternoon, and very much to reflect sort of the 12 local authorities within the East. As we've said, the East area covers a significant geographical area with lots of industries, and some of these are shown on this slide there, including sort of life sciences, oil and gas, hospitality, food production, etc. And some of these are obviously very much STEM, but actually some of them also include STEM skills in many ways that may not just be as obvious to us, and yet STEM is incorporated in lots of these areas and lots of these jobs and lots of these sectors as well. And as we're working in the east of the country, Skills Development Scotland are updating on a monthly basis at the moment regional skills assessments, and we'll maybe pop those in to the chat pane for you so that you can refer to the one that's relevant for your local authority or area there, and we'll follow up afterwards with those for you. And these very much are kind of being published on a monthly basis and show what the kind of current situation is like within the job market within each of the local authorities and what it's likely to be like in the kind of medium and longer term. So that's worth certainly knowing about, because it can influence some of the pathways that our children, our young people and our families take as they're looking for employment within Scotland, and specifically, I suppose, within STEM for our kind of interest purposes. Thanks for moving on, Julie. I wonder if you can use the raise your hand function within the bar at the bottom of your screen, if you were able to watch the video round about kind of science and STEM capital before the session. I think Hazel had sent it out within, yep, I can see there's several people have got hands just raised there. That's really helpful to see. So super, wonderful, thank you. So we've got a good number of us have been able to do that. And what we thought we would do, I appreciate that if you haven't had a chance to do that, we're more than happy to share that link with you just now and to give you an opportunity to watch that video there. I think we've probably got about half the people have managed to watch the video. So are folk okay? Not got a hand up, but did see it. Great, thank you for confirming that. For those of us who did manage to see it, are we okay if we continue to have a little chat round about that? Yep, still got people raising their hands, that's grand. So, well, a couple of minutes. What resonated with you from the video as you watched it? Sorry, Kaylee, you're still having issues. Yeah, the recording will be available later, very much. Would anybody like to kind of unmute their mic and to come in and see what they noticed round about the video, what resonated with them? It was just a kind of 2-minute clip round about science and STEM capital. I'll maybe say a little bit about it just for those who haven't managed to watch it so far. And it's research done by King's College London and Professor Louise Archer. And it's a longitudinal study that's taken place over several years. And it's looking about sort of the STEM skills gap. And in what the research showed was that the gap that was there kind of sort of 20 years ago, and the choices that young people are making about whether they're going into kind of STEM subject or not, they're still the same as they were kind of 20 years ago. And it kind of, the video got to the heart of how people engage with science. And it talked about sort of the knowledge and the skills and attributes and experience that children and families have to do with science and to do with STEM. And all of that experience together can impact whether or not they think about science is for them, whether STEM's for them, and whether they're more likely or less likely to kind of go forward into that as a pathway and as a career. And Louise Archer speaks about in the kind of clip and the research is how we can work together as a kind of system, schools and families and communities together to build that science capital of everybody. And by doing so, it helps the experience for everyone in order to kind of bridge that sort of gap that can exist and has existed for a number of years. I'm wondering, Hazel or Lynn, if there's any kind of comments coming through from the chat about what people thought round about the video and what resonated with them.
Yep, Christina was saying that she saw there was a real gap in the availability of STEM capital, and she's now just added the fact that there's not really been much change in that over the years, which I think, yeah, we do recognise that is a major issue for families and for children.
That's great, thank you. Thanks for that observation. I wonder if anybody else wanted to come in on that. Yeah, we've got we see. Thanks, Amy. You're saying you like the analogy with the hold all. Yeah, it's a really nice one just to say everything that goes in there contributes to, and you can kind of take that with you. You don't ever kind of leave that behind. Thanks, Nicola. You're saying you like the bag idea. Everywhere, everything affects that experience. And I suppose that kind of brings us to the focus for this programme is no matter what our role is, that we've got a part to play, an exciting part to play in how we support our children, how we support our families, so that they can really make that hold all, that bag as full as it possibly can with lots of really great experiences. That means that when it comes to making choices, actually our children and our families are really reinforcing positive messages about science being for them and something that they would choose. And kind of Scottish Government very much summarised the kind of statement round about STEM capital, saying a wide range of knowledge, experiences, attitudes, behaviours and practices that will influence people in a range of different ways, and obviously very much important for the equity and equality agenda. I think, Jane, just before I hand over to to Hazel to take us on to the next section, Jane's saying there, I think it's important that it's not just experiences during class time, but making other opportunities available too. Absolutely, Jane, and that's very much why we wanted to make it families and communities and schools as the focus for today, and not just about what happens in one place, so that children and families and communities see those experiences joined up right across, because that will ultimately influence the way that they think and the choices they make. So thanks very much for adding your thoughts to the chat pane and for your reflections on the video just now. I'm going to stop sharing at the moment, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Hazel, who's going to specifically tell us a wee bit more round about the Equity Toolkit and STEM Capital a bit more. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Mary. Julie, if we could move on to the next slide, please. Jane, it's almost as if you read our minds with the next slide. The next thing that we're going to talk about here, building on the work done by the Aspires team and their original research paper, they developed a toolkit called the Science Capital Teaching Toolkit. And I know we've got quite a varied audience this afternoon. The toolkit was written originally for secondary practitioners working in science departments, but there's lots of it that's relevant to primary education and to informal learning settings as well. So what we'd really like you to do just now is, as I go through this list where we're going to talk about the 8 key dimensions of science and STEM capital, what we'd like you to think about, you might not know what these dimensions are, but there probably are a lot of them that you're doing already. You might just not be naming them or recognising the contribution that is making to the development of science and STEM capital. So I'll go through this just now. Feel free to add your comments to the chat box as we go, and we'll do a wee review of them at the end. So the first dimension of science capital is scientific literacy, which involves supporting learners' understanding of science and how science works. Julie, this one goes on, so we've got lots of clicks for each one. The second one is developing science-related attitudes, values and dispositions through talking about the role that science plays in culture, society and the local community. This could be discussing things like climate change or the use and misuse of statistics in the media and different marketing claims. Number 3 is developing knowledge about the transferability of science. This one, you can do this by highlighting science skills involved in a wide variety of jobs, including those that we maybe wouldn't normally associate with STEM, such as transferable skills that can be used in the fields of journalism, law, business, these different areas. The fourth one is promoting science media consumption. Ways you can do this is by encouraging learners to watch science documentaries on the television. I'm sure there will be people on here that absolutely love David Attenborough, so that's a brilliant example. Reading science-related news stories, or even following STEM pages on social media. The fifth dimension, you may already be involved in some of this depending on your setting and the sector that you work within, but the delivery of out-of-school science learning is really important. And we feel, particularly when we've got the opportunity to talk to a mixed group, that we're really keen to encourage strong links between sort of formal education settings such as schools and CLD groups and organisations, so that we can sort of encourage practitioners to signpost the young people and children that they work with to STEM learning opportunities, both within school but out with school as well in their own communities. Number 6 is supporting learners to find and recognise any science skills, knowledge and qualifications that their family members might use in their jobs or their daily lives. This is very easy when you've got young people that have high levels of STEM capital, because they can make that link. If they've got a parent or family member who is an engineer, they will get that quite quickly. But as practitioners and educators, we can really help other learners to actually see where those skills can be picked up in a huge variety of different jobs. Number 7 is knowing people in science-related roles. Now, in an education setting, you can achieve this by introducing learners to people who work in science-related professions, such as STEM ambassadors. And then the last one, number 8, is talking about science in everyday life as part of your learning activities and with parents and families at home. The aim here is to normalise science talk outside of formal learning environments. So it's not just something that happens in a classroom or in a lab, but that science and STEM conversation is something that we really want to try and encourage throughout everybody's daily lives. We'll just take a wee moment there to sort of pause and reflect. Lynn and Mary, I wonder if there's anything that you want to pick up on from the comments that have come in on the chat.
Yep, Ailsa said very early on that she thinks that science is still not supported enough in a primary setting. And I think, yeah, we do recognise that's the case. And Jane's just added, she knows that in some primary settings, teaching science is quite a scary concept. Absolutely, Janie. You know, there's a lot of people that have maybe not done science since they were at school and gone into teaching, especially in the primary sector, where the last science was at secondary school, and they might not even have done any science to Nat 5 level or whatever. So yeah, science can be a very scary topic for primary teachers to actually teach.
Christina, I just saw that comment coming in. We've got a brilliant link for you at the end that we can talk to you a wee bit more about some professional learning that's available, particularly for staff in early year settings. So we'll link you in with that. But completely appreciate that point that depending on the route and pathway you've followed into the role that you have now, it might not have had a focus on science. Yeah.
And sorry, Hazel, are you seeing these yourself? I'll just let you address them.
No, it's okay, Lynn. I'm going between screens, so I'm just about managing.
Yeah.
So Ailsa's picked up there on the availability of resources as well. So we'll try and sort of throughout today's session, and when we're thinking about session 2 and 3 as well, try and share some examples where you don't necessarily need really expensive specific science kits, but you can make use of resources that you will probably already have either in a school environment or resources that can be easily found around the home. Cooking, Vary, that's a brilliant example as well. There's so much that goes into that. I wonder if there's anybody else that wants to add anything in that they're already doing, or anything that they think that they could implement into their practice quite easily. I think for me, probably the easiest one that I hadn't really considered before looking at this research was the impact of looking at science media, and that could form part of a homework task. That could be, if you know that there's a brilliant documentary series on, you could be encouraging learners to watch that. And the really brilliant thing about that approach is that can be something that children and young people can do at home with family members and have those conversations, rather than it just being an activity that's completed by the individual learner. If you do have any other thoughts, folks, feel free to add them into the chat. But what we'll do, sorry, Amy, I've just seen yours pop in. Linking with local partners to link with local scientists, definitely, and videos on YouTube where people talk about their jobs. That's a really good example, Amy. We are, you may have seen it, our STEM Twitter account. We're doing a STEM job of the day. So that's something where you can keep an eye out there on Twitter for links to resources. Another example of videos. Reach Out Reported as well. It's a really good example. Blue Planet, Mary, definitely. Remote learning, creating profiles of STEM pioneers. That's a really nice idea. We'd love to see some of them. Lego and construction workshops, brilliant, from Gregor. Glasgow Science Centre as well. Yes, we've also got Dundee Science Centre have got a really rich sort of STEM at home programme as well, and they're doing sort of STEM at home boxes for over the holiday periods that we can share more information with if you would like to know more about it. And Sarah, and then the nursery setting, geographic videos on YouTube, brilliant. Tomorrow's Engineers, a great website, Amy. Dad's Lap, we've got loads of things coming in there. That's really fantastic. The F1 Jaguar Challenge with Primary 7, there's so much activity. Sarah, this is maybe a wee bit off topic, but but you'll know that my dad is a massive big fan of rhinos, and he loves watching the videos from Blair Drummond Safari when he can't actually go and visit. So there's lots of rich activity that's going on, and I think it's important, picking up on the earlier comments that people made about teaching science, particularly in a primary setting, sometimes can be viewed as scary or intimidating. But even just looking at all of the really rich activity that's going on across your settings just now, there's lots of things that you can do that maybe doesn't look like a sort of traditional or stereotypical science experiment, but we need to think about science and STEM in its broadest sense so that we can build that capital for all of our learners. Julie, we'll maybe move on to the next slide now, if that's okay. So what we're looking at here, moving on from thinking about science and STEM just in a school setting, Professor Louise Archer and a team of British and American researchers have really recognised the important role that informal STEM learning has on building STEM capital. So they've recently embarked on a 4-year project looking at youth equity and STEM. The YESTEM project addresses fundamental equity issues in informal STEM learning across a range of different settings, which includes science centres, community groups and academic organisations. There's lots of conversation just now about equity, and it's a key principle within Scottish education. But with the YESTEM project, the definition that they use for equity is a model of social justice that attempts to challenge and transform social inequalities and work towards more just power relations. They encourage practitioners to focus on the individual needs of learners and to consider the unique local context in which they work in order to achieve a more equitable approach. So through research and development, the project aims to bring together researchers, practitioners and young people to develop practices that will support equitable youth pathways into STEM and to improve access to informal STEM learning for minoritised communities. Up on the screen just now, if we can move on, Julie, sorry. One of the first outputs from the project is the Equity Compass, and this is a tool for supporting socially just practice. The tool has been designed to help practitioners move science from being a destination for the elite few to being a vehicle which serves and belongs to the entire community. Although the Equity Compass has been developed and tested within informal STEM learning settings with young people, it's also been applied by practitioners working with adults and by teachers and other educators working in formal academic settings such as universities and schools. The axes of the compass highlight 8 key dimensions of equitable work. These are power, interest, needs and values, approach, orientation, centrality, participation, resources and time. You can use the compass to evaluate all levels of your practice in relation to each of the axes. The nearer the centre, the less equitable practices are and the less likely they are to engage and support underrepresented communities. The compass will help you to reflect on, plan and track your practices in supporting learners towards more socially just futures in STEM and beyond. It helps to identify how and why particular examples of practice may be more or less equitable. By mapping your practice, the compass can help support planning for improvements in equity within your setting. By addressing each of the segments, the Equity Compass will help you to identify ways to support learners' STEM agency and to build their STEM capital. Each of the, sorry Julie, if we could move on to the next slide. I know that the text here is quite small, but it was just to give you a wee look at this just now. We will go into more detail with a couple of the elements shortly. But each axis of the Equity Compass has a set of associated guiding questions to help you reflect on your practice. You can apply the compass either generally or specifically, using it to consider anything from an organisational top-level policy right down to a single session within a STEM learning programme. You can use the guiding questions to help you reflect critically on each compass axis. We ask you to think about where would current practice sit on each of the arrows. You can use the compass to draw or map it onto the diagram. You can track your progress towards more justice-orientated practice by charting outwards movement on the Equity Compass. You can also use this tool to identify areas that you would like to work on further. For example, if you engage with the compass, you might want to prioritise areas where your mapping sits in the centre zones of the compass and pick them out as your priorities. And you can use the questions to help prompt ideas about how future programmes and activities might be planned in line with the 8 dimensions of equity. On the next slide, we're now going to have a wee look in detail at 2 of the axes. So we're going to look at power and participation. Julie, if you could click one more time for me, we can focus in on those ones. So thinking about the power axis, this helps us to think critically about traditional notions of science and STEM. Are we reproducing these dated and potentially damaging power relations? Are we disrupting them, or are we achieving transformation in these power relations? So you should be able to see the questions up on the screen just now. I would like you just to take a wee minute to think about what that means for you and to reflect on these questions. You can add any thoughts into the chat box, or if you want, please feel free to raise your hand. Lynn and Mary will be able to sort of keep a wee eye on that and bring people in. But the first question about to what extent are these relationships being reinforced or are they being challenged? Some examples of that are you challenging stereotypical views of scientists as white middle-aged men with crazy hair, or is that something that you're maybe inadvertently reinforcing? Are there hierarchical relationships between adults and youth? Does anybody unwittingly make reference to some of these elitist representations of science knowledge? Sometimes that can come with linking only to universities and sort of higher academic study without giving the full recognition to the breadth of science and STEM capital. I think we've got a couple of hands up there. Lynn and Mary, did you see who was putting their hands up first to maybe bring them in on this?
Yep, there's maybe a couple of legacy hands. I don't know, I saw Miss King's hand go up in relation to this kind of question. I don't know if N. Gardner and Jean Tuck hands is up a legacy hand, but certainly Miss King, your hand came up. Would you like to unmute and to share your thoughts?
Sorry, I didn't mean for it to click it there.
Oh, that's okay, not to worry. There's not anything in the kind of the chat pane at the moment, Hazel.
No problem.
So maybe people are just kind of reflecting and digesting what you've shared with us this afternoon.
That's absolutely fine. And the second question is kind of looking at who has agency, power and legitimacy. So when you're thinking about STEM and science in your setting, is it something that's coming just from a course plan where you're being directed by the E's and O's and that's what's in the plan and that's what's being delivered? Or are you finding opportunities to build on the interests of learners? Do they have the agency and the power to make decisions about science and STEM aspects that they are interested in? I wondered, Christina, I can see you've put a comment, books and images have been difficult to find with appropriate images. Our gender balance and equalities team have done a lot of work on this, so that's maybe something that I think Lynn, Mary and myself might be able to do to get a wee bit more information, because we are aware of examples of different resources that maybe do reinforce those stereotypes, but people value the input from other resources. But we've got lots of lists and examples of resources and books and images that can be used. So we can definitely share that with you, but that's a really brilliant example. Thanks, Christina. I wonder if anybody else had any other thoughts or comments about what those sort of power relationships look like within their setting when they're thinking about science and STEM education at the moment.
Yeah, there's just a wee comment coming into the chat pane about there's obviously still a sort of thought around kind of ticking off the E's and the O's and the benchmarks, and of that idea of kind of coverage has kind of popped into the chat there, Hazel.
Yep, I see that one in from Ailsa as well. Thanks very much. Now, obviously, we do, as practitioners, we do have a responsibility to think about the curriculum and think about that planned learning, particularly when we're thinking about learners' needs to develop skills and transitions. I think Christina picking up on the point, early years, sometimes it's maybe easier to come from the child. I think that's a brilliant point, and I think practitioners across all different sectors, sometimes it's really good to look for examples of practice out with your own setting and out with your own sector, and think about how that can be adapted to work with the children and young people that you're teaching. Again, mainstream nursery comment about following children's interests and focusing on nature, brilliant. Amy, it's a really good point, not just to engage with elite scientists at universities. Yes, Amy, completely. They're often, you can get people that are involved in lots of STEM ambassador activity, and sometimes that might be the easier option, but there's opportunities to link in with DYW organisations and maybe even parents and carers from within your own school community who might not be an engineer. It might be somebody that's a farmer, but they're doing lots of STEM-based work within within their day job that might be able to speak about that. Kay Laurie, sometimes using the E's and O's as that sort of starting point when you maybe don't have the confidence, completely understand that as well. Co-production helps to create equitable learning, definitely. So when you've got the adults and the children and young people working together. And then Sarah, yeah, that's sort of thinking about planning almost opposite way around. So looking at the children and then reflecting back onto where that doesn't link in with the E's and O's. Just before we wrap up this wee section, we'll have a wee look. I'm just wary of the time a wee bit. We'll have a wee look at the participation axis as well. So this one is, there is some similarity here. We're thinking, is the practice being done to, for, or with underserved young people and communities? This one in particular, we're thinking about, obviously we've got a schools context where within school you will tend to see a whole cross section of society within that school environment, whereas sometimes in community groups you might have different groups that are in place for different reasons. There might be support for families where there's maybe children that are more vulnerable. You might get a different type or a wider selection from you would working across the board with school settings. Who has ownership and voice in decision making? How participatory is the practice? Are young people's producers or just consumers of science? That's a really great one, because that's going, are you encouraging children and young people to actually put forward their ideas? Or is it just a case about learning about things that have already been discovered? Are young people valued partners, and how is youth identity and agency being supported? I wonder if there is quite a lot of overlap between power and participation. I think, yeah, Mary, definitely, sorry, picking up on family learning as well, from that point of view, thinking about children and families, and particularly focusing on building that STEM capital with families, not just with the learners. I wondered if there were any other thoughts or comments before we wrapped up that section on the equity compass. We will share, when we share the recording of the presentation and when we share the PowerPoint, we'll share the links to a downloadable version of the Equity Compass. So if it's something that you would find useful to discuss with colleagues in your setting, you can definitely do that, and you can think about, we've not got time to go through all 8 of the axes today, but there might be other ones that may tie up with aspects of your improvement plan already, and it might just be a wee support and resource. Angie, just picking up on your comment, if we can introduce an activity or range of activities to young people as tasters, then develop on that based on what sparked an interest. That's a really good example, and I think we're starting to see, particularly in secondary schools, some really nice examples of that as well through interdisciplinary learning approaches, where there's maybe a wee bit more flexibility in terms of decision making for some learners. Perfect, Mary, thank you. What we'll maybe do just now, Lynn, I'm aware that we don't have a huge amount of time left, so I don't want to spend too long, because I know we've got a fair bit of information to share with resources. So I'll hand over to you just now, Lynn, if that's okay, and then if anybody's got any questions, we can pick them up at the end.
Okay, thanks, Hazel. Julie, could you move to the next? That's perfect. So first of all, yeah, we'd really like to thank you for taking part in this online session, and it's actually been great that you've interacted in the chat with us, because that doesn't always happen. We do get tumbleweed moments, so it's great that everybody's had, you know, put in their views and shared thoughts with us. We hope what we've shared with you has been informative. And just to summarise, we're just finishing off with some key messages. We do believe that family and parental engagement are key to building STEM capital in our young people. And in order to engage your learners with science and STEM, it is important to know them as individuals. What are their interests? Where do they come from? And what is their STEM capital before you go any further? Consider the benefits of using the STEM capital teaching approach and the YESTEM equity compass. These tools will help you build the STEM capital of your learners and within your wider community. And finally, I would encourage you, strongly encourage you, to work in partnership. This could be with STEM industry, STEM ambassador program, DYW partners, but also to consider partners within education, including school, CLD and third sector partnerships. Julie, could you move to the next slide, please? With that in mind, we're very well aware that, you know, and it's been mentioned already, that often people don't know where to look for resources. So we've created this slide, which gives a list of resources that we think would be helpful for you, any of you in the sectors that you work in. The STEM Wakelets we created sort of the beginning of last year, and they're a collection of links to materials stored online that can be used for any of the following areas, be them early learning and childcare, primary science, BGE, secondary sciences, senior phase sciences, LFS, outdoor learning. A lot of these activities are don't necessarily need to be done in school. They're very much activities that could be done with families, could be done in an outreach programme, and could be done in a much more casual setting than actually in school. These links could take you to the National Improvement Hub, Glow and websites, or YouTube. So there's a huge variety of examples on there. They're divided up into sections. The sections sometimes just say things like 9 items, but those 9 items then have items within them. So don't think when you go on there that there's maybe only 1 or 2. There are actually hundreds of resources on there. The second one is one that was brought to our attention by our CLD colleagues, and this is Aberdeenshire's Wakelet, and it's showcasing the work of Aberdeenshire Council's Community Learning and Development team in their delivery of science, technology and engineering and maths in the community, and that's just recently been put up, so that's a very current one for you. The next one down is the STEM resources on the National Improvement Hub. And on there, we've got a summary of key information, resources, exemplification relating to all the STEM subjects. And it's to support policymakers and practitioners from all sectors with an interest or a responsibility for STEM-related learning. Next down would be the STEM National STEM CLPL module. I'm just trying to see, yeah, this is at the University of the West of Scotland. This is the one that Hazel was alluding to earlier. This module is part of a suite of national CPL modules that the University of the West of Scotland run, which are free. They're aimed at those working with children in early learning and childcare. And as I said, they're offered by the University of the West of Scotland. So that's a direct link to their page, which you can click on and sign up for. And they do give you a good bit of time to fill in these modules. You don't have to do it all in one go. It's not a case of sign on and do it all together. You can come back and dip in and out to it. And it's really quite a worthwhile module. All of us have done it, and we found it quite interesting and worthwhile. Underneath there, we have the RAISE programme. For those of you who are not sure what RAISE is Raising Aspirations in Science Education programme. And they are involved in many of the authorities across Scotland and in some of your authorities, some of you that are on here. And they have primary science development officers who are working in the regions, but they also have provided links to key documents, including evaluation of the RAISE programme. And we're happy to put you in touch with RAISE officers who might be in your region. Gail Duffus is here in the meeting today as well, so if you're wondering if you do have a RAISE officer and you want to ask that question at the end, please feel free, and I'm sure we can put you in touch with someone in your authority. Underneath there we have North Ayrshire Family Learning Team. They work in great partnership with the schools across North Ayrshire to provide opportunities for family learning. They've developed this site using information from partners they work with and to provide ideas and links that they believe will support fun learning at home. Now this next one is brand new. It's our STEM online resource that we softly launched last week. And there's huge resources in there. We are still developing this site, but we're keen to take feedback on it, and in there you will find just about anything we hope to do with STEM, including resources, exemplars of good practice around the country, our STEM Nation Award. We also have an online calendar that tells you of any days or events that are coming up, and we hope to keep populating that. So it's very much in the developmental stage, but again, we're happy for you to go on there, and we're happy for you to feedback on those ones. The ones down at the bottom are available to anyone with access to Glow, and that's why I put them down at the bottom. But please be aware, if you're all teachers have access to Glow, but if you are currently do not have access to Glow, please be aware that anybody working with children and young people can apply for access to Glow, and please feel free to ask us to help you do this via our STEM email box, which is on the very first slide. It's just we'll kind of go back to that at the end, so that if you have any questions. I'm just going to add into that as well. We do have Twitter accounts. All of us here have personal Twitter accounts, and we also have the STEM Education Scotland Twitter account, and there's also a Raise Twitter account. And on those, if you're on Twitter, all of those, we promote things that are happening in our area and nationally. So if you are somebody who's on Twitter, then you might find it worthwhile following any of us, our STEM Education Scotland page as well. I think that's all the resources covered, and as I say, you'll get a link to all of those. Just very briefly, the very bottom one, the Glow Sciences PLC, has got a lot of primary science. I know I'm mentioning this one because it came up in the conversation. There are thousands of resources on there for primary science, and also for PGE and senior phase science. And my colleague and myself spent months at the summer going through these and trying to make them more accessible for you. So please do go on there. They're for all the organisers that you have in science, and for Nat 5, higher, advanced higher, they're all there. Please feel free to go on and have a look at all of those. Julie, could we have the next slide, please? So I'm aware of the time, so I'm just going to go over this. This is something you can have a look at more when you get it back. Again, we're just saying when you're considering STEM Capital, we encourage you to start with research with the original Aspires report and young people's science and career aspirations. It's a lengthy report, but there's a lot of really good information in there. And as was alluded to earlier, this was carried out over 5 years with learners from 10 to 14. Admittedly in England and Wales, but I think it reflects science and STEM throughout the whole of the country. Since the publication of that, there's been a second one published last year in February 2020, which followed the same group of learners from 14 to 19. And that was published in October. They also published an early insight into the impact of COVID lockdown on 20 to 21-year-olds. So a lot of really interesting information from the Aspires team that if you're interested in following that up, we would thoroughly recommend that as reading. Bedtime reading maybe, I don't know. And if we can just go on to the next slide, Julie. So I just want to mention this, self-evaluation and improvement planning. To support practitioners and school leaders, Education Scotland developed this STEM self-evaluation and improvement framework for ELC settings and schools, which you can find using the search in the National Improvement Hub that we mentioned earlier. For CLD practitioners, we've highlighted a couple of the QIs from how good is the learning and development in our community, and these are closely linked to the approaches to building STEM capital. It's useful to consider these when reflecting about your own professional learning and when engaging in conversations regarding evaluation and your school improvement planning. Just going to check. Was there any questions in there at all? No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody's got anything.
Lynn, there weren't really questions as such, but it's maybe just mentioning Christina sort of added further support and a further recommendation for the University of West of Scotland STEM module for early years staff. And Amy and Jane had sort of suggested that a nice activity to engage with would be to encourage learners themselves to think about the concept of STEM capital and what they have in their own STEM toolkits, which was a really nice suggestion.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Yep. Okay, I'll just move on to the next slide. After these slides, I'm not going to go through them, but there are a whole lot of additional resources and whatnot. But this slide, we'd just like you, if you could, we'd be really grateful if you could fill in, and it is a very short evaluation for us to make sure that we're meeting your needs going forward, and especially with the future delivery of the webinar series that we're doing just now with yourselves and any future webinars that we provide. So I'm going to, yep, Hazel's put the link in the chat, and if you want to just click on that and do that as we finish. Julie, I'm just going to very quickly touch on the last 3 slides, and then we'll go back to the original one. So if you could go to the next one. So again, just some references and key documents there that you'll be getting when you get this PowerPoint presentation for you to have a look at. And the next one, Julie, yep, some videos to support professional learning as well. We realise that's a huge thing, and we're also looking into creating some videos as well on professional learning. So a whole list of videos there that you can click on, probably too small for you to read just now. And the next one, yeah, just again, additional resources that are there. So you can see the STEM Twitter accounts on there. You can see there are hundreds and hundreds of resources there that you can access. And if you have any trouble accessing any resources, or you're looking for something in particular, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We're only too happy to point you in the right direction.